Mm. What's up, Yang Gang? So today we have a very special guest who has not quite arrived yet, but he'll get here in just a minute. And his name is Joseph L. Flatley. He is the author of New Age Grifter, the story of Gabriel of Urantia, or Urantia, however you want to pronounce it. And while we're waiting on him to get here, we can go ahead and get a few housekeeping things out of the way. I went ahead and went live because my biggest decision is what to do with my boxer while my wife is away at the grocery store. So I set the computer out there. See, I'm smart. Now she can hear my voice and she won't bark. Pretty smart, right? I think our guest has arrived. Special shout out to my sister. Today is her birthday. I'm not going to tell you how old she is. She probably doesn't want me to say, but happy birthday to her. Much love. Make sure that if you haven't already to become a member, and for as little as $5 a month, you get our custom emojis. And the more people we have as members, the more emojis that we can make. Now, let me see. All right. Lenny, what's up, man?
Oh, just fighting with my computer. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, I can hear you. You come through loud and clear.
Oh, thank goodness. The air conditioner's not super loud?
No.
Oh, thank goodness.
See, you're worried about the air conditioner. I'm worried about my boxer barking.
Oh yeah, well, if yours starts, my little puppy will start, because I've done like 5 interviews where like you hear a dog on the other end, and then all of a sudden this one starts up. And they're fun, for sure.
So, for those who don't know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody your background?
My name is Joseph L. Flatley, and I'm a journalist based in Pittsburgh, and I kind of cover fringe topics, conspiracy theories, bizarre subcultures, crime, politics, really anything that I find interesting. And I've been very interested in the conspiracy theory stuff for a long time. And it's been interesting to see it over the last several years turn from like kind of a quirky fringe topic to, you know, what everybody's talking about now, the influence of QAnon on our politics, and Donald Trump is the conspiracy theorist in chief. So I'm interested in looking at those topics, you know, almost like in a sociological way. Like, what does it mean to who we are as a country that we're going down these rabbit holes?
Yeah, I mean, I can. It's kind of crazy to see. Just, you know, you have people like Alex Jones, who is, you know, he's been proven right on a lot of the things that that he's been putting out over the years. Is he a little bit on the crazy side? Yeah, probably, but it is what it is. You got to take the good with the bad. And
Yeah.
the thing is, I guess, is the reason that people believe in them is because they do exist.
Oh, sure. There's a term, parapolitics. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It kind of is the study of the politics behind the politics. So, you know, we learn in civics class in high school that, you know, we elect people, they listen to us, we vote them in, they vote in Congress to pass the laws that we want passed, and it's the most simplistic possible explanation of democracy, and it's totally wrong. There's this whole other level of power and influence where people have agendas and they're making deals, and that really is kind of the root of, that's been described as parapolitics, and that's really the root of conspiracy theory. But while all that's going on, also conspiracy theory culture, just as much as it's about these like realistic parapolitical concerns, is also about, you know, whether or not the vaccine has a tracker for Bill Gates, or, you know, if you have reptilian soul, or, you know, DNA or whatever. So it's like the word conspiracy theory kind of runs the whole gamut, and that's why I don't really like to use it, because it's not that useful, because it too all encompassing. You know, so you do have somebody like Alex Jones, who I think, you know, broken clock is right twice a day. But if he's the only person talking about these topics, of course people are going to listen to him. Of course people are going to accept what he has to say, because I mean, there's a real need to understand what's going on behind the scenes. And when nobody provides it, when the mainstream media doesn't provide it, you end up going to Alex Jones or someone even crazier.
Yeah, but you got to, I mean, like, I'm going to be honest, that jacket behind you, it kind of freaks me out.
That was a joke that somebody gave me, and I didn't realize it was up there.
But speaking of, I mean, you know, you see like the CIA, and you see like everything that they did in South America when it came to, you know, bringing crack to America and funding their whole war. It was, you know, a perpetual war. I mean, you hear shit like that, and then you hear, you know, like the Tuskegee experiments and like just all these different things that the government has admitted to doing, right? They've admitted to it.
Sure, well,
so
I mean, those are all real, and those are all important stories. And by, you know, someone like Alex Jones, by combining those with a host of things that are misinformation or disinformation or just plain wrong, that's where the confusion comes. If we had like an honest press that was that busted the Tuskegee syphilis experiments right when they happened, or, you know, who listened to Gary Webb when he was talking about the Contra to crack to Los Angeles pipeline. If we had like a real press that took these things seriously, then people would be much better informed. I absolutely agree. I just think that there are a lot of con artists out there. There's a whole media ecosystem of con artists that use people's real, legit fears of conspiracy to make a lot of money. And it's kind of leads to my book, because I mean, you know, this UFO cult in Arizona that I've been investigating for years, he does the exact same thing. He has his members locked into their compound, and he fills their head with conspiracy theory, end of the world myths and stuff, freaks them out and makes them really easy to control. I think that happens quite a bit on the internet, and it's a real problem because, like you mentioned, there are real things going on behind the scenes that need to be illuminated, for lack of a better word, but they're not being. So that leaves con artists and grifters to take advantage of people's very real fears of those things.
So you mentioned your book, which is the reason that you're here, is to promote that book. For those who don't know, the Book of Urantia was supposedly written in anywhere from like the 1920s to the 1940s in Chicago, and the authorship is kind of unknown. What they think it was the story that I understand, right, is that these people channeled, or this guy started channeling this stuff that was coming to him from supposedly this higher being, and he wrote it all down in this book, him and his wife and all these people, and thus you have the Book of Urantia, right? The reason that I know is because I have a copy of it. I've been on kind of a different journey. You study it for like the sociological impact.
Yeah.
I kind of came to it through my spiritual journey, right? And once I start on something, I tend to like absorb it all, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of cults, I've read every book that there is on that L. Ron Hubbard put out on Scientology. And what I try to do, right, is I try to take all these different pictures and try to like take it and find where it all fits, right? And then you hear these stories like this guy who you wrote about, right, who is out there, and they find suckers like me, and they're like, hey, listen to this, you know. But talk about this journey of this book that you wrote.
Sure. Well, I'm really excited to talk to somebody who's familiar with the Urantia book, because a lot of times I do this press, and it's an obscure spiritual text, and a lot of times people need like kind of the background, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners would. But basically, the thing that strikes out about the Urantia book that comes out to me, and I'd be interested to hear your take on it. It's a very non-authoritarian text in the sense that there are no priests, there are no popes. Either you read the Urantia book and you discuss it with like-minded Urantians, or you don't. But it's really like a very democratic and very modern kind of take on spirituality. Um, I don't know if you'd agree, but that's kind of my understanding.
See, this is why I was excited for this podcast because I get to geek out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is a very non-authoritarian. And it's so weird because the text, right? It goes on and explains how all this stuff supposedly fits together, right? This whole big picture, and it's very in depth.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be honest, I probably got through maybe 2/3 of it. And then I just
so 2/3 is pretty good.
Yeah, but it was almost like trying to read J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings.
For sure. And but you know, so where my guy comes in, Gabriel of Urantia, is he's a kind of a hippie from Pittsburgh, where I'm from. That's one of the things that attracted me to the story. You know, he's a baby boomer. He grew up in the 60s. He like started out as a Christian, kind of coffee house acoustic musician, you know, and you know, kept getting divorced. His music career wouldn't take off, and he discovered the Urantia book. And instead of taking it kind of in the open spirit that it's intended to be taken, that non-authoritarian spirit that we discussed, he used it as the foundation to build his own religion that is very much authoritarian. So he's the boss. Everybody that is not him on the planet is spiritually lower. He has a lot of, he's gained a lot of materially from this cult. You know, he's got, you know, he like traded in his wife for a younger model, but he keeps the new, you know, the old wife around. And he has a radio station in Tucson that just plays his goofy music 24/7. He's got a compound in the desert with a mansion where he lives. And basically he's got 110, 120 some followers, and they're all waiting for the end of the world. They think the world's going to end, UFOs are going to come, and they're going to like crawl out of their bunker and take over as the new leaders of the world. But in the meantime, they're just like, you know, picking beans in the garden and working in this guy's businesses. It's like a total con. So to see something as pure as the Urantia book become a vehicle for this guy's ego and what he's, you know, what he's able to get away with is really kind of one of the more fascinating parts of the book.
Yeah, I read the article that you sent, and this dude he is making so much money, man. It's crazy. He's taking advantage of these people, and they're like putting in all this work. And, you know, if I ask a lot of questions, it's because, you know, when I was little, my mom used to tell me, she was like, you're either going to grow up to be a politician or you're going to grow up to be a pastor. And so I'm kind of thinking of marrying those two things and becoming a cult leader myself. So
glad I can help you on your journey.
It's crazy just the amount of money that this dude is making.
Yeah, and I mean, compared to Scientology, it's not a huge amount, for instance. But you know, you get 100 people working for free since 1989, so 30 plus years. That's a good chunk of change, for sure. It's yeah, and it's one of the strangest things is that like they struggled for a long time, but they found a couple businesses that really became money makers or seemed poised to become money makers. So they have a hospice. So they operate a hospice. They send nurses to people's houses that are on their deathbeds and nurse them, you know, and that they make money off of, I guess it'd be Medicare, or so the government's literally funding this cult in a sense. And on top of that, they started a hemp farm a couple years ago that seems to be doing really well. And if you can grow and sell hemp, you're practically, printing your own money. So I think they're really interesting. They're kind of in their last legs because the leader is in his 70s. He's not going to be around that much longer, but they seem to be doing better than ever financially.
You know what's crazy, right? Is like I looked this dude up. I looked up his music and all this stuff. And I was sitting there and I'm watching this guy and I'm like, he reminds me of like Joe Exotic in a whole lot of ways.
Yeah,
I see so many similarities between like his little music videos and Joe Exotic's music videos.
Yeah, it's like both of them, they make these music videos and like everybody's afraid to tell them that they're terrible, so they put them out. It's like, yeah, I mean, I think it really affects your mental health, being told that you're right and everything you do is right for a number of years, Of course, Joe Exotic, I think, had crystal meth or something to help him. But either way, it's a crazy way to live.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of weird to see, like, I don't know, because like I consider myself fairly spiritually developed as far as I know enough to know that I don't know anything. And then that's why it's really, really frustrating for people like me who are on a spiritual path to see people like that who have taken something that's supposed to be helpful and turned it into something that's very, very harmful.
Oh yeah. And I mean, talk about taking advantage of people at their most vulnerable. They come to him and they're having spiritual crises, or they're maybe fallen off their own spiritual path. They're having a hard time trying to, figure out their place in the world. And then, they hear about this community in the desert, and by all outside appearances, it's fantastic looking. Like they have, I don't know if you've looked at any of the pictures, but they have like an eco village. So, they practice ecologically sound building techniques, and they, do agriculture and permaculture and, renewable energy and stuff. And all the houses are beautiful because they like they designed their own structures. And so it looks phenomenal. Of course, if you see the website. And then on top of that, they're like, we're going to give you the answers to your spiritual quandaries. Yeah, of course you're going to go and check it out. And then, they're masters of manipulation. So it takes a year or so, takes 8 months for you to figure out what they're really about. But by that time, you've given everything away. You've signed a contract, and, it's kind of too late. Alienated yourself from your family. I mean, it's not like they lock people in. It's not like a jail. But when you've been there long enough and you haven't been paying taxes, you haven't been paying into Social Security, you don't have any savings because you've given it all away. You've ruined your relationship with your family because you've been told that they're evil. And then you've been in this place for like 20 years. What are your options? Can you really leave? It takes a great leap of faith to do that.
Are there really people there who have been there for like 20 years?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, so it started in 1989. It was located in Sedona, Arizona. Didn't move down until like the 2000s. But yeah, there were people that joined up right when they kind of kicked off. So 30 plus years, and, people who were, people who are in their 70s, 80s now, perhaps. And, and it got progressively crazier over the years, but what that does is it filters out the people that won't put up with it. So you end up with like a pretty hardcore group of people that can't or won't leave after 30 years of this.
Well, I mean, you're sitting here and you're describing to me this beautiful place that's so eco-friendly, and these motherfuckers who have been there for 30 years, it seems like they got what they wanted out of it, didn't they?
Well, no, I mean, if you're poor and your healthcare is crap and you're not allowed to have a relationship with your family, and there's a great deal of psychological manipulation that goes on behind the scenes. Um, the main one is they call it the chip game, and it's not a game. What it is it's a system of like surveillance, basically, where everybody in the community basically watches over each other and snitches to the leadership if something's done wrong. They fill out a form, it goes up the ladder. And what this does is it basically gives Gabriel and his leadership a map of everybody's behavior and thoughts at any time, which is extremely powerful when you want to manipulate somebody. And then they have a program they call it the Personality Integration Rehabilitation Program, which is basically like a coercive form of therapy to like further get people to do what you want. So the reason people are still there is because they're kept, they're kept confused, they're kept afraid, they're snitching on each other, their emotional lives are turmoil. Like that's the real power of Gabriel, is his ability to mess with people's minds. So it does, by all counts from the outside, look great, but it really isn't.
Yeah, see, it sounds to me like what he's done is he's basically instituted communism in a small way, in this small little place. Everything's going to him, the state, and he's dictating what the people can get. I read in that article that you sent me that did people went into town and they got like a $40 allowance or something? What was that about?
Like $40 a year to spend on clothing. Yeah, and they got to like go to to thrift stores, and they don't even do that anymore. Everything's kept in a in a trailer or a few trailers on the property, and then if somebody needs something, they can ask the leadership if they're allowed to, if they need a new dress or if they need a new bicycle or whatever, and then if it's available and if the leader decides they get to have it, it's handed over. It's it's like the worst kind of caricatures of communism that you hear when people talk about, kind of a priestly ruling class at the top that takes all the wealth and just hands it out a little bit at a time. It's pretty, and it's done that way on purpose because leadership wants to live the good life. It's, there's Gabriel, and then there's his partner who used to be like his romantic partner, but now she's just like the leader of, a spiritual co-leader of the group. And they're at the top, and they have a series of elders, which is like, I'm gonna say like half a dozen. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact number, but it's like around half a dozen people who, kind of do their bidding and keep an eye out for things. And then, it's a hierarchical structure. It goes down from there.
It's got it. Now you actually went down there and attended a service, right?
Oh, I sure did.
Talk about that experience. How weird was that?
It was weird, man. It was, so it was April of 2019, and I went to Tucson to interview a few ex-members of the cult because a lot of them are located in the Tucson area because it's close by to the cult compound in Tumacacri, Arizona. And I was there, and I just called the group up because they had I was listening to their radio station the whole time. And I was down there, and they had like an advertisement for, if you want to join. So I called them up, and I was like, yeah, I want to join. I want to check it out at least. And they, they had a public service, but it was like, wasn't like what you think of a church service where you just roll in and go to church. It's like, yes, it's open to the public, but you have to show up at a certain time, and they walk out. They let themselves out of this like electronic gate, and you're standing there, and they pat you down for weapons, and then they bring you in, and then they like press a button, and the gate locks behind you, and then it's all very scripted. I went to the service. I had to pay him $50, I think, and yeah, right. And I watched.
Bitch, I ain't got $50.
Oh yeah, it was $50, and like I go into this big church, and it looks really nice, and everybody's dressed nice, and they're laughing and talking and stuff. And then we watched like an hour of, before it even started, they like started playing YouTube videos of like what we were talking about earlier, the conspiracy theories, like, you know, like mudslides and, you know, UFOs and just every like doomsday thing you can imagine. And they were like,
I subscribe to a lot of those channels.
you know, it's like these guys don't do anything. They don't watch TV all week. And then they're watch this stuff, and they're told by their leader, you know, this is actually happening outside right now. If you leave the gates, you know, you're not gonna be safe. And it's really, it was really bizarre, and it really just impressed upon me like the power of a lot of these things, that a lot of these like this conspiracy misinformation to really freak people out and make them susceptible to psychological control. Then after an hour of that, it turned into just like a regular church service, and they talked about the Urantia book for like 4 hours, and it was so boring. It was just awful. And I was like trying not to fall asleep, you know. And then it was funny. They actually put me in a seat that was like in the middle of the congregation, but directly in front of Gabriel. Like he was going to be keeping an eye on me the whole time. And still didn't keep me awake. And then after that, so it was like 5 hours at church, and then I got to meet a couple of the people in the cult, and they gave me enchiladas, and
That is hilarious, dude. But when you were talking about it, right? You were talking about being at the gate and them coming out and to pat you down. I started breaking out into a cold sweat because it sounded a whole lot like prison, you know?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, very similar, you know. I mean, you know how like, you know, it's like 9/10 of the prison is in these people's minds, though. You know, they don't have to go to the extreme lengths of like a prison of Attica State or something, because these people are so wrapped up in the drama and in what their leader's been telling them that they don't want to leave. And like I said, and they can leave, you know, it's just they don't have very many options on the outside.
What do you think? I kind of feel like it just speaks to this yearning desire that we as humans have to want to know what the next step is.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, we all have that. And it's really a genius like Gabriel that can pounce on you when you're at the lowest point, when you're the most desperate, you know? It's like, I think any of us, if we were in the right headspace, if we were, you know, came across someone like Gabriel at the right time, could be dragged in and taken advantage of like this. Most of us, thank goodness, won't be. But it's, you know, it's a very real problem, and it happens, you know, happens in these kind of like goofy religious cults. It also happens with like people on, you know, political leaders, or, you know, YouTube influencers that are kind of like spiritual YouTube influencers who like you don't actually, maybe you don't even physically go visit them, but you send them money and you obsess over them, and then you drive your family nuts because you won't stop talking about them. You know, it's very much a QAnon thing now. But that's one of the reasons I liked doing this book, because it's an extreme example of something that I think is increasingly commonplace.
It is, and I want to kind of touch, and this video is probably going to be demonetized because we're talking about QAnon. But screw it. If they demonetize it and they take it down, whatever. So let's talk about that, though, because there was a lot, even myself at one point, I was like, you know what, maybe these people got a point. This was like early.
Oh, yeah.
In the early days, I'm like, because I've been studying conspiracies for a long time, and a lot of the stuff that they believed in the early days was things that I had researched myself.
Sure.
Oh yeah. All through the years, and once I start going down a rabbit hole, I just keep going down, and this is why I get caught up in all this stuff. But talk about just the level of belief that a person has to have, because there's still people who think that Donald Trump's going to be reinstated.
I know. I was at a rally. I was like at an anti-masker rally, as a journalist a few weeks ago. And first thing I heard when I got there was like, either Donald Trump is our hero, but we have to fight for him and all this stuff. I thought, oh my goodness, the election was 6 months ago. Get over it. But yeah, I mean, speaking to the QAnon thing, you're right. It's like what, been going on for 4 years now. And it's had so many iterations, like in that 4 years. Like initially it seemed reasonable compared to what you have now. Cause it was like,
it did.
It's like, it was like a really interesting take on conspiracy ideas that had been out there forever. And just like Gabriel in the desert has spent the last 30 years perfecting his pitch, what's going to get people, how am I best to get my hooks in people? What's best to get my hooks in people? QAnon's been kind of doing the same thing. It's like getting crazier and weirder. And not only does that alienate the people that are kind of half-hearted, that aren't really even interested or won't be that hardcore, and it really draws in the people that would be that hardcore. And that, so it's kind of like you have like, the QAnon faithful. Now you have a faithful group of people that are really with it, through hell or high water. I mean, they haven't even heard from Q since December. Or, it's like he hasn't been, or they, or whoever it was, hasn't been communicating at all. The last Q drop was like a link to the Twisted Sister video. We're not going to take it, to that song. But people are still more than ever like part of the movement. It's scary.
It is, because what you're left with is those people who are, for whatever reason, they're like so invested that I don't think that their psyche could take it if they were wrong.
Right. Yep. For real. It's it's scary because they're like zealots. It's like the way you just described it's perfect. Their psyche couldn't take it if they were wrong, so they're never going to be proven wrong. They're never going to let that happen. They'll kill you before, some of them will kill you before they allow you to prove them wrong.
But you kind of see that in today's political climate too, though, right? I mean, that same diehard, it's either Republican, blah, 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 or Democrat, blah, blah, blah. And it's like most of us are sitting here and we're like, man, both of y'all are fucking corrupt. What are you even talking about? But it's like that in our political climate.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's only because mainstream culture has gone down that road, and it's because, talking about the Yang Gang, people don't have like basic material needs met, don't have healthcare, don't have jobs, losing jobs because of automation, that makes something like QAnon possible. I think if we were a healthy country with people who had jobs, had money, had all the things that we need, that nobody would care about QAnon. People would be like, "This is ridiculous. I got to go to work," or whatever. So it's like, I don't see this as like the big cause. I don't think like demonetizing and pulling videos that mention QAnon is going to save anybody from QAnon. I think it's very basic material needs need to be met, and that will save us from QAnon and a whole host of other problems.
So you're saying that there's a direct relation between, like, maybe not the entire result, but there's a direct relation between something like QAnon springing into existence and the things that Andrew Yang was talking about?
I believe so. I think that it'd be interesting to see. I bet if we had a universal basic income, a lot of people would have better things to do than QAnon. I've seen so many friends go into QAnon or just into kind of like really dubious politics, like Trump politics, that like, their business is hurting, or they're, or a relative, or they're going broke trying to like supply healthcare for a relative, and they don't have enough money to retire. Their job is increasing hours, but they're not, still like barely holding their heads above water. And these crazy ideas start to make sense to them, and to hear them explain it, it's not making any sense. It's not like they're, it's not like, it's not like QAnon is actually solving any of their problems, but it's a psychological solve or psychological Band-Aid that, when the problem is, the rich, the divide between the rich and the poor is so great, and people are walking around without basic human needs being met. I think there's a direct relationship between that state of affairs and QAnon beliefs and the more outrageous, inaccurate conspiracy theory beliefs. And I think it'd be really interesting to put a paycheck in people's pockets every month and see how that affected it. Because I think it's a real.
It's funny that, sorry to interrupt you, but it's funny that you mentioned that, right? Because I'm thinking back in my own life.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time when both my wife and I were like down every conspiracy rabbit hole that there was. And it's weird, right? Because we were broke all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Now we're not by any means, like right now we're still on Vermont's unemployment, right? Because of the pandemic.
Sure.
But like in those early days, like we didn't have any money, and we were wondering how we were going to make the bills. And so what ends up happening, right, is you start watching these videos and you get sucked in because you need a reset. Mm-hmm. You need in your personal life, you don't know what you're going to do to make the bills for the next week.
Yeah.
And you're counting on one of these conspiracy theories to come through so that there's a global reset where we don't have to fucking worry about the bills anymore, or whether we're going to, be able to make rent. Mm-hmm. And that's because you got to think about it. Andrew talks about this all the time. He talks about when you don't have, when you're operating from a lack of resources, it takes one standard deviation away from what you're able to deal with. Mm-hmm. And so you're constantly focused on all of these negative things, and it just becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy all the time, and you're just living in this perpetual state of dread.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, it's really interesting to hear you kind of speak to this from your perspective. And is that kind of the thing that made you, I'm not equating Andrew Yang with QAnon at all, but
right.
But was it that same quality that left you open to like pursuing alternative ideas that let you open to eventually discovering Andrew Yang and his message?
Yes, because that's just it, right? I had never ever heard of an idea so revolutionary as universal basic income. I have always fought for homeless people. You know, anytime, you know, we have literally videos on our old channel where we would set up just to feed homeless people in Charlotte when we lived in North Carolina. And I've been there myself. I've been homeless. I know what that's like. And then, you know, you hear this idea of universal basic income, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, what? Are you telling me that we could literally cure the homeless problem? Because guess what? Most homeless people don't want to be homeless. And this pandemic has just it has crushed people who were just barely hanging on. There's nothing left.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's our government isn't, I mean, a complete reordering of priorities is called for. You know, I mean, if we hadn't gone into Afghanistan and used that money to solve homelessness, we could have solved it 20 times over. We could have started going to other countries and solving their homeless problem, you know?
But could we have? You know, because like what? Yeah. Look at California. You know, Joe Rogan talks about it on his podcast. These places, they become an institution and they're getting more and more money every year, and they're not actually solving shit. They got a bigger homeless problem now than they had before, and yet they're getting allotted more money because their job depends on there being homeless people.
Right. Well, I mean, like I said, we'd have to seriously reorder, you know, how we handle things. But I mean, on a very basic level, to like give people a universal basic income, give them a place to live, give them food, it would be very cheap. But I mean, it's a sick society that, you know, where you have people whose livelihoods thrive on there being homelessness or there being an incarcerated population. That's the fact of the matter. Like, I think, you know, we have to just start at the top and start changing the way things are done. But I think a lot of people are against that because they're taking advantage of the status quo.
And that's kind of where I saw Andrew, you know, there was this whole Yang media blackout. There was, during his campaign, they would, you know, let Yang speak. They wouldn't let him talk during the debates, and just all these different things of where they tried to shut him out, you know. And being the conspiracy guy that I am, I see the pattern. You know what I'm saying? And I really believe that was because his ideas absolutely threatened the establishment.
Yeah, for sure. You know, there's always been candidates like that. Like in 2000, I remember, you know, Ralph Nader was running, and they wouldn't let him in the presidential debates. I actually, you know, I have a very strong memory of going to Boston where the first debate was going to be, and, you know, me and 3,000 other anarchists, like, you know, protesting the fact that he wasn't allowed in. And then, like, you know, it was starting to get dark. The sun was setting. It was like a cowboy movie. They were like lined up, facing off. And then like a transit bus, shuttle bus drove by, and the only person in it was Ralph Nader. They kicked him out of the debate, and he was like driving home by himself in this bus. And I just thought, this is how they treat a presidential candidate. I mean, it's not even about him winning or Andrew Yang winning. You know, Andrew was a long shot, but the fact that his message couldn't even be heard really just says a lot about the media and the political establishment.
Yeah, it does, man. And it just, you know, I came from the Republican side. I'm a lifelong conservative, and I switched sides the minute we literally delivered the paperwork to the Vermont Capitol building in Montpelier, and, you know, to get his name on the ballot here in Vermont. I mean, we fought tooth and nail because his idea, when Donald Trump was first running, right? Donald Trump, he was like, man, you fucking Democrats, you guys suck. You guys are all in you. And he was talking to the Republicans too, though. He was like, you know what? You're all corrupt. I'm going to come up there and I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to come up there because I've got fuck you money, and you are not going to be able to tell me what to do. right? But Donald Trump, and that was the, you're sitting there, you're looking at another Bush,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at Hillary Clinton,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, hell no, I do not want any more of these warmongering these corrupt ass people are so blatantly putting it in your face that this is, basically once you're in politics, you're a lifer. And Donald Trump had that message where he was going to drain the swamp. But guess what? Donald Trump did not have a plan. He did not have a plan to drain. It sounded good,
sure,
but there was no plan.
Yeah, I
and
never.
There was democracy dollars, and it was like, oh shit! All of a sudden, here's a way to wash out all that corporate money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's
I'm sorry, man. I get wound up. Go ahead.
Wound up. It's like, talk about like one of the biggest, most intractable problems of our time. How to actually clean up the government when nobody in government wants to be cleaned up. Yeah, I don't know.
So here's my thing, right? Now we both studied conspiracy theories for a long time.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we were going to concoct a conspiracy theory right now here between me and you, right? And we were going to figure out a way for Andrew Yang to win or to run, or for somebody like Tulsi Gabbard. I'd be all for somebody like Tulsi Gabbard winning. Mm-hmm. What plan could we come up with to defeat the establishment, the left and the right?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's like, that is such a good question. I mean, it's like, on one hand, I would feel like an underhanded, dirty, corrupt conspiracy plan would only lead to bad things, Like, I can't see somebody stealing their way into the White House and then somehow fixing things. But at the same time, there's no legitimate way for somebody who really wants to change things to get into the White House. I mean, we've seen that prove out over and over. So, yeah, that's a really good question.
It's food for thought, ain't it? But you know what? I think I've played this through 1,000 times, right? In my head, and I believe that there is no more ripe a time for somebody who is a third party to win the presidency of the United States, because people are fed up with both sides.
Yep.
There are more people who are politically homeless in this country than there are on either side, right?
Yeah.
So if you're Andrew Yang, I say that, you know what? We live in an era of podcasts. We live in an era where CNN is dying. Fox is dying. All these corporate media types are just, because people don't trust them anymore. Yep. People don't trust them, right? Because it's our generation and it's younger generations. And we've all seen the boomer generations, and we were like, you know what? Y'all were fooled. We're not being fooled. Right. Y'all ain't fooling us, right? We see that y'all are really just a bunch of wolves in sheep's clothing. We know that you're controlled by big business. We know all these things. These things aren't hidden anymore. They're pretty much out there for everybody to see.
Yeah.
We see your corruptness. That's the message that you got to go in with, right?
Yeah.
I see you're corrupt. The left is corrupt. The right is corrupt. And if you go in and you start throwing haymakers on both sides and say, you know what? Listen, if you, the American people, elect me as president of the United States, I will serve 1 4-year term. I will get these things passed. I will get universal basic income, and I will get democracy dollars passed. And then I'll be gone. You won't ever see me again, because then the ball will be set in motion, right? You won't be able to stop it at that point in time, because all the corporate money will be washed out of Washington, right? There's no way you'll be able to stop it. And then you'll never hear from me ever again. I think if you went in with that message to the American people and you started hitting the Joe Rogan podcast, all these huge big podcasts that have millions and millions and millions of views, I mean, there are new thought leaders out there now, and we don't have to bow to the corporate media anymore. And I think we can win.
Well, I hope so. We should try it. That sounds pretty good to me, for sure.
No, you've got to give me more than that.
I mean, that's kind of the kind of candidate you're discussing is, sounds like Bernie Sanders, not, maybe not what he would do once he got elected, but that kind of insurgency that really excited people, that really, I think if anybody had a chance to get around, the corporate media and the corporate parties. Now, he didn't run as an independent, so maybe that was a flaw. But I mean, talk about an insurgent candidate. I don't know if you had an example of that better than Bernie, and his own party went out of their way to take him out.
Right. So, that's right. But you can't let the Democrats or the Republicans hamstring you. You've got to go at this thing as an independent. And if you've got to spend money like Ross Perot did back in the day and buy yourself some fucking TV time, then that's what you do. And you get your message out there that way. You think about it, man, Ross Perot almost had enough for an upset. He ended up splitting the vote, right? But here's the thing. Even if we split the vote, right? Let's say that's the worst case scenario. We split the vote. Who the fuck cares? We're letting them know that we're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to take the establishment on either side. You got to think of it like a battering ram. We've got to keep hitting this door of Washington until they hear the people, because quite frankly, they don't hear the people.
Yeah, you're right. When are you running?
No, see, what's crazy, right, is I could actually run for like Congress, but I could never run for the presidency because I'm a convicted felon, and you can't be a convicted felon and run for the presidency. But I will help Yang win.
Have you had contact with the Yang campaign during the last election?
The what?
The Yang campaign. Did you have contact with them during the last election?
Which election?
The last presidential.
The presidential?
Yeah, presidential.
I mean, we didn't know. We were never officially part of the Yang campaign, right? We were just those poor suckers from North Carolina who had, no YouTube experience whatsoever. And this guy named Andrew Yang comes along with ideas that you believe so much could help the people of this country that you have to do everything that you can to get him elected. And because I see the heartache that this country is going through, I see the hurt that people feel on such a visceral level, because I've been there and I know what it's like. And so, we were just very politically homeless. We called ourselves conservatives, but I'd never, tried to help somebody actually get elected. There's this idea, excuse me, sorry, I get emotional. There's this idea of humanity first that he started putting forward. And it was a message of, it doesn't matter what side you're on. This is affecting all of us.
Yeah.
And we have to start putting humanity first. And it resonated because that's the message that I believe in. And so here we are.
Wow. And very cool. Yeah, I've been checking out your channel. I am sorry to hear about your wife's father's experience in the hospital with COVID. That was some pretty upsetting stuff. So did hope somebody, so they said that the nurses were giving him a hard time because he wasn't vaccinated?
Yeah, it was you know, and that's just it's crazy because like he's never been the anti-vax person. You know what I'm saying? He is an old Navy guy. He was in the Navy for a lot of years, and you know they back in those days they give you a whole lot of vaccinations. So he's never been anti-vax, and then he's sitting in there, right? And this nurse is like looking at him. She's like, "Well, what are you gonna tell all your anti-vax friends now?" I mean, I'm just like, what? The woman actually said that to you. I was like, that's so horrible, man.
Yeah, it's so unprofessional, and I have to admit that if you're an ER nurse or a critical, ICU nurse at this point, you're probably so burned out. She probably just
somebody kicked her dog that day, yeah, and she snapped on him.
Yeah, but it's
people, but that's just it, man. Where do you see society right now? Because I see a whole lot of weirdness out there.
Oh, I think it's insane. Like I have a podcast called Failed State Update, which I think your listeners should check it out. You should check it out. You probably like it. And really what it came out of was I saw a point with it was really the politicization of COVID and how crazy people came when COVID hit, how crazy people became when COVID hit, whether, whatever side that they were on. And I'm like, this isn't like the Democrats versus Republicans in a logical, rational sense. This is like collective insanity. I think that the pressure cooker has been turned up so high, again, talking about, what we were talking about earlier, talking about QAnon and how if society's not running right, not running well, and people don't have, food and healthcare and money, they start acting a little crazy. And I think society's crazy right now. I think like a lot of the stuff, a lot of people's politics and how they're responding to things, I think really can't just be described by like rational choice. I think you got to go, well, we're all going a little nuts right now. And, maybe like the millennium just came 20 years too late, but that's kind of my basic diagnosis.
You talking about like the time where the world is supposed to end, that time period?
Yeah, well, where people not the world ends, but people think the world's gonna end and go a little, nutty.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're kind of living through that right now.
It's crazy. I have never seen something that's so polarizing as like this whole. I mean, it is like literally turning families against each other. This vaccine, no vaccine.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. I have a good friend who. He's like, I'm not anti-vax, but I don't feel good about getting the vaccine. And it's like, I'm totally cool with that. Like, I don't, I'm doing what's right for my family and myself, and he's doing what he thinks is right for his family, and I can leave it at that. But people, yeah, they're just on such. I mean, the most disgusting thing is every time somebody who's unvaccinated dies of COVID, and then you see a bunch of tweets talking about how hilarious it is because this anti-vaxxer died. And it's like, it's okay when the wrong person dies to make fun of that, or to, it's like, it's only a problem when the right person dies. That's sick.
If that's the case, then should we be cheering every obese person that dies? Because this is one of the most obese countries in the world.
Sure.
I mean, is it okay to cheer on an obese person's death, or a handicapped person's death, or anybody else's death? No, because guess what? Guess what, fuckers? We all end up in the same place, dead. So it don't matter whether you have a vaxxer or an anti-vaxxer. Eventually, if you look at the grand scheme of things, right? Eventually, either we all have vaccines and we're all good, or we have vaccines and we have people with antibodies. So we're all in the same place eventually, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I don't think it's nearly as simplistic as a lot of people seem to think it is. COVID's such a mystery. Like, I know people who have, you know, who have like one person brought it home to Thanksgiving dinner, brought COVID home to Thanksgiving dinner, and like this was before the vaccines, obviously, and like, you know, the whole family was sitting there, and like one or two got sick, and the other two didn't get sick, and it's like they're all the same amount, they're all the same distance from dad, they're all breathing the same air, so like how come some people get it and some people don't? Or, you know, you hear stories of like Lollapalooza this last week or 2 weeks ago was huge, and like tiny amount of cases have been traced back to that. How come sometimes there's these outdoor events and there's huge outbreaks? How come sometimes there aren't? You know, it's like, well, I guess they had to be vaccinated to get into that. So I don't know what that has to do with anything. But COVID is complex. I was speaking to somebody in epidemiology who said that we're not even going to understand what COVID is for 50 years. Like, we have like a very basic understanding of like, you wear a mask so you don't spread it, take the vaccine and it cuts down on how bad it is if you do get it, but wash your hands, but like don't be in an enclosed space. But like the neurological problems that are caused by it and health problems that are caused by it that have nothing to do with, you know, the pneumonia stuff, it's very much unknown. I think everybody has to be a little less sure of themselves and thinking they have all the answers, and everybody that disagrees with them is wrong, and have to be a little more humble, a little open to other ideas.
And it's really weird, right? Because me and my, you know, to touch on what you were talking about, I was talking to my father-in-law, and I was describing to him how it's almost like a tornado, right? You know how a tornado will like touch down and it'll just like completely obliterate 3 or 4 farms, and then there'll be one farm that's just left there standing.
Right.
This is like in the same path, but it didn't get touched. It's almost like that's what like coronavirus is like. It's like it'll wreck somebody who's in their 20s, and then it'll leave somebody who's in their 50s or 60s with a little bitty sniffle. But then it'll like wreck a whole bunch of other people. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's and we don't have and you know, going back to our larger point about like how society's kind of organized, we don't have I knew that this was going to be a disaster because we don't have a country that's ready to handle a pandemic. I mean, you know, basically right now they're talking about giving people booster shots, and they're not even like sure that booster shots would be helpful, but it's like they've already basically, that tells me that our government has given up on everybody in the country who refuses to get vaccinated or can't get vaccinated, and has given up on the rest of the world who don't have them. And they're like, well, we're going to take care of our own. And that to me is a sign of a broken country.
So you think that's, wow, I never even really thought about it quite like that, you know? It's so weird because it seems like we you know, I from the conspiracy perspective, I see all these rich people and they've got all these underground bunkers, and they're ready. They're ready for the collapse of society, or they think they're ready. Let's put it that way. They've got it to where they can go down and they can hunker down if society does collapse. Because what I'm seeing, right, is I'm seeing this huge confluence of events, and it's just going to get to a breaking point, right? It's got to sometime.
Have you ever been down in one of those bunkers?
I have not had the good fortune to be down in one of those bunkers.
I've been in a couple, and you wouldn't want to spend the rest of your life in one of those. You know, they're underground, they're damp. It's like they make really nice ones, but it's like they make really fancy ones, but you're still underground. And if your sump pump quits, forget it. You know, you're going to be ankle deep in water. So it's like, I mean, that really speaks to me, like the pathology of the rich thinking we're going to build a hole in the ground in Kansas. We'd rather go live in a hole in the ground in Kansas, or now Elon Musk, we'd rather go to Mars than fix the problems we have here in the United States. That's just absolutely terrible.
It is. But I see Elon, and we got to have the Elons of the world, right? We've got to have the people who have this vision of trying to get us off this planet, because I believe that our future does lie in the stars, right?
I agree, but I think that, let's give Timmy food first and then go to Mars. Let's
Timmy can get his fucking food from Amazon, and he can be happy doing that, and we can send Jeff Bezos to space.
Yeah, exactly. And throw away the key.
It's nuts. Listen, I want you to go ahead and plug your book for everybody so that they, and give everybody your information, because I'm looking forward to it, and I'm going to talk to you off the air about getting an autograph copy.
You can hook that up. This is the cover. New Age Grifter, the true story of Gabriel of Urantia and his cosmic family. And it's on Amazon. You can pre-order it. It comes out next Tuesday, so 6 days from now. If you order it from Amazon, it'll appear on your front porch on the day of the release. And anything, my mailing list, I got a pretty good subscription newsletter called Failed State Update. I got a podcast also called Failed State Update. This book, other books on conspiracy theories and cults and weirdness. Go to lennyflatley.net to check out all that stuff, or follow me on Twitter at lennyflatley. My DMs are open if you want to get a hold of me. Anybody want to know how to get a book?
For sure. And I'm pretty sure I've got all the links in the description to your stuff.
Great.
So people will be able to find it there. Just click the little drop down box and you should be able to find it. It's under the description. And man, I'll tell you, it's been really fun to be able to do this and to be able to talk to you, because I don't get to very often, if that makes sense, man. And, it's just refreshing to finally get to talk to somebody who has seen kind of the same things. And before we get out of here, I want to ask you something, right? This is something that I was wondering, because you have been through all these conspiracy theories, and you see people like Gabriel, and how has this affected your viewpoint on spirituality?
I'm one of these people that becomes spiritual when I'm like depressed, and then like the rest of the time I don't really, I'm Catholic, and I've been raised Catholic, and that's my thing. What really has struck me the most about this project, this Gabriel project, is the number of people that got out of his community, which you would think they'd be turned off to the Urantia book or hate the Urantia book. But there are, quite a few people who are like, get out of it, and they're like, they actually really see something pure and good about the Urantia book, and it almost like their faith in it has been strengthened by going through this experience. And I just find that really interesting. I think that if you have a faith in something, it can be tested, and you can come out the other end of it with a stronger faith.
But don't they, by their very nature, aren't like all religions just like big cults?
Well, no, I mean, innate, when you decide to become a Lutheran or a Catholic, you can go to the library and find out exactly everything they believe. You can go to a priest and ask him, and he'll tell you exactly what they believe. Any religion is created by people, and people can become corrupt. So there's always going to be corruption, but I think that there's something about the religious cult where you join and they slowly let you in on the secret as they slowly tighten their grip on you. I think that's like a unique, very corrupt kind of experience that isn't really it might have the same trappings. They might use the same words or dress up the same way as like a religion, but it's not really the same thing. I mean, I would say that religions suck in different ways from cults, but you know, they are different.
It seems like, you know, I don't know, because I've often thought about this too. I'm like, you know, why doesn't like the Yang Gang just like go and buy like a town,
Yeah.
and just we all just live there and we'll promote these ideas of humanity first, and we'll show the rest of the people how it could be done, right? I know it's almost like a dream of utopia, but I just feel like, man, there's got to be a way where we can wake us. And I feel like this pandemic has done that to a large degree. It's woken a lot of people up to the fact that we're all in kind of this vulnerable state, and we're kind of at a crossroads here in this country. And I think we're either going to go Mad Max or we're going to go Star Trek, you know? And it's looking really grim right now.
I mean, the world, humanity is definitely not faced the problems that we're facing now ever. You know, like talk about, you know, so you might be right. I think people have always believed that the world was at the, you know, the end was nigh, but I think you might be right this time. I think like, you know, if you think the world's going to end, you only have to be right once.
That's for sure, because everything that I'm reading about, like, okay, you know, our electromagnetic sphere is, you know, the thing that keeps us, like when CME's impacted, that's what keeps our grid up and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that sphere has been weakened to a point where it's only going to take one good CME to completely fry our grid system. And you think about that, once that happens, man, you're back to square one, and you better be ready. You know? Because the reason that that's is being caused, right, is because we're heading to a point where it's almost like there's going to be an ice age, right? Because there's so much fresh water that's going into the ocean from these polar ice caps that are melting. It's going to create this weather pattern that's on the earth that's just going to, I don't know, man. I think we're headed towards the end, bro.
Well, good luck with that. I wish you the best.
For sure. Well, listen, we thank you for being on here, man. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Lenny. And I hope that you will come on the show again, because I don't think we're gonna be perishing anytime soon. But one day it's gonna happen.
Well, thanks for having me. It was great talking to you.
Absolutely, brother. And one more time, tell the people the name of your book and where they can find it.
New Age Grifter, the true story of Gabriel of Urantia and his cosmic family. Just type New Age Grifter into Amazon. It'll come right up. Or go to my website at lennyflatley.net.
Awesome. Brother, thank you for being here.
You got it.
All right. Well, there you have it, Yang Gang. That was a pretty informative conversation. And hey, none of us know how the world's going to end. I guess we should always be ready. But that brings me to my closing point. Because we don't know when the world is going to end. So you know what we need to do instead? We need to love each other, and we need to care about the next person, and we need to lift each other up. And if you see somebody that's hurting, guess whose responsibility is to help that person? And right now we're seeing a whole lot of people find themselves in those situations in much larger numbers. And it's heartbreaking, because I see so many people, and I try to help as many as I can. And it's almost like we're fighting an uphill battle. So what we have to do is we have to keep supporting people like Andrew Yang, who is out there continuing to fight. We need to support people who are trying to put the idea of universal basic income out there, because in 100 years, that's all that's going to matter. Nobody's going to remember the politician. Everybody will remember the fact that people are now getting universal basic income. that people are now being listened to by their governments, that people are now caring about each other a little bit more. Gang, gang, we love you. See you on the next one.